Hey everyone, it's a pleasure and honor to be here today talking to you in terms of just this topic about tools and solutions for frictionless e-commerce. Before I start, I really want to kind of thank each one of you for taking the time to be a part of the ForFest, and I do want to kind of give a huge kudos to peers for really demonstrating growth mindset in terms of really pulling together this festival in terms of curating a array of speakers from different backgrounds and really making this virtual thing happen. Wish we were all in our favorite city of New York, but we are doing all this virtually, which is pretty interesting for all of us. So going forward, if I had to kind of look at what I want to talk to you today is about uh, frictionless e-commerce. And I thought that perhaps a great way to start this session would be to kind of with this beautiful quote. I'm going to talk about three things where I'm going to talk about the digital landscape, some of the friction points which are there, and some of the tools and solutions. And before we kind of get into zooming out and looking at the world view, I really wanted to kind of start with this quote, which Satya kind of shared during the earnings call. And it kind of stuck to me, and this is true for each one of us. And while we've all seen a digital transformation happen at work, I think what's really been interesting has been how digital has kind of permeated into every moment of our life. So if you look at how we are, how my son is learning, he's in NYU, but he's doing all his learning here, sitting out in Seattle. If you look at what's really happening to things in general, we are living in a world where we are doing a lot of things remote. And digital is getting incorporated in each of these life moments. So it's while the digital transformation is happening from a work perspective in terms of all things that we do, it's really interesting to see how this has become such an integral part of our lives as well. And if you really ask me, some of the shifts that have happened in the past few months, we've had some massive transformation happening with retailers really pivoting to digital and consumers also kind of embracing this trend. And if you really look at why this has happened, and if you were to kind of identify one key disruptor, I think it's the internet, which has really made such a big difference in our lives. And as we all would appreciate, today, especially in the times that we live in, life really moves faster than ever before. And some of the numbers here are truly telling. If you really look at, it's all about the gram. We are constantly living in a social world. We are streaming and streaming and social are becoming front and center for a lot of things that we really do. So you can clearly see how our lives are becoming much more digital in the way they are getting transformed as well here. And to really look at it from a slightly different perspective, and if we were to kind of just look at what is this doing to shopping behaviors, and the question perhaps we all need to ask is what will change in the next 3 years? But perhaps the more important question for us is what will not change? And that's a really interesting question, because if you really look at the pandemic, we are in a scenario where we are living in a scenario of unknowns. And given that unknowns that we deal with, it is so important that we have strategies that are flexible and adaptable. Having said that, if you were to just look at how shopper behaviors are going to shape in the future, I think some of the trends here are pretty clear. I think social commerce is going to be really critical. Social channels are transforming themselves from being publishers to becoming more retailers, and especially with the advent of instant storefronts, which actually are really shortening that purchase path for shoppers and making it really easy for consumers to buy, we are clearly seeing that it's really taking off in a really big way. And that combined with mobile, which is so critical, and for most of us who are in a purchase journey, our first mile of the purchase journey is totally in the mobile. And so mobile is really becoming so critical as a part of our shopping experience as well. And that really brings me to, what's the role of stores in all this? And perhaps the role of stores is going to change. When we look at stores historically, stores used to be temples of experience, as I would call them. Whereas now I kind of see in the emerging role of stores shifting to more centers of convenience. And so as we kind of imagine the new normal and we get to the next normal, I think the role of stores will fundamentally change. And as Corey, the CEO of Best Buy, said, even the values that are associated with the store, which is more about fun, are going to be changed to more about safety. We used to be used to stores being as high-touch environments, and we are actually entering an era where we are getting into what we call as contactless retail. So that's really some of the trends that we need to embrace. And if you look at the shopper behavior and what that does to the opportunity from an e-commerce perspective, while this is going to be the first year where we will see a decline in terms of retail growth, what's interesting to see here is e-commerce is the powerhouse, which is really going to drive growth in retail. And if to grow in e-commerce, I think is an imperative for every retailer to make sure that they can seize that opportunity and make sure that they can drive growth. So e-commerce is going to play such a critical role in terms of driving growth. And within e-commerce, if we were to kind of deconstruct this and look at what's that driving force for e-commerce, I think it's mobile commerce, and it's very clear. And there are two key factors which perhaps drive this growth here. One is clearly the social commerce piece, which we touched upon. But the other interesting piece is also the phenomenon that we see with apps. And for those of us who use apps for shopping, we would realize that apps are personalizing the experience to such an extent that it's addictive. And in many ways, once you're used to shopping in an app, you just want to kind of be in the app and have that kind of experience, because app experiences are hyper-personalized, they are decluttered, there is less noise in terms of the overall experience is much more curated, and all that really makes a difference in terms of our overall shopping experience. So I clearly believe that mobile first and making sure that we really embrace the mobile commerce opportunity that e-commerce presents is going to be key for us to unlock that growth opportunity from e-commerce. So with that context, I now want to kind of switch gears to the next part of the presentation, which is all about really understanding this concept of frictionless e-commerce. Now, the timeless truths of retail have always been centered around these three key pillars. It's always been about the price, it's been about the selection, and it's been about the experience. And what e-commerce has done on price, I think we all know, I think just given the construct of the marketplace and the ability to discover prices, clearly we know that e-commerce offers great value to customers from a price perspective. And even from a selection perspective, I think e-commerce is really strong in that area, because the unit economics of really offering that range of products on an e-commerce platform is far more efficient as compared to distributed inventory, which you would have to carry in physical store environments. So from both these perspectives of price and selection, I think on e-commerce, most of our retailers do a great job. But the real issue that we have to answer is, how do we really match up when it comes to experience? And while in conventional brick and mortar retail, a lot of work has really happened on the experience side, perhaps the experience piece is the one piece that we really need to focus from an e-commerce perspective. And from that standpoint, I think really looking at eliminating any points of friction and truly getting customer-centric and making sure that we are getting obsessed about that moments in the customer journey is really going to be critical to address that gap from an experience standpoint. And if we can do that, then we are getting better in terms of getting to the state of frictionless e-commerce. So talking about customers, and really want us to ground us into this customer journey, and to keep it very simple, it's all about going to the fundamentals, and it's this simple framework of ABCDE, which is all about, the customer journey, which is focused on attracting customers. It's all about the browse state of the journey where you're looking for options, and then you're making some active considerations, finally you decide and you execute. Now, with the pandemic, one of the challenges that's really happened is that this customer journey has become largely online. And given that it's become online, we do have a set of challenges that we need to address. And some of the friction points, which I think we all got to deal with, is the first one is, given that we have such a huge selection, we have too many choices. And so we do have to deal with this paradox of choice. The second one, which is there, is that given that stores are not functional at this point in time, many stores are closed, we can't see the products before we buy the products. And finally, I think we have the challenge of recommendations neither being timely nor relevant. So these are three key friction points. And what I want to do is deep dive into some of these friction points a bit more before we get to the tools and solutions. So even if you just relate to a category like which we work in laptops, and you'll see, if you were to kind of look for a laptop, you just get presented with a plethora of options, and it's not really a great experience in that sense. Or if you will kind of go and really want to try a product, and we all come from a retail environment where we want to go and try, today's scenario really doesn't let you make that try before you buy happen. So we are challenged in that aspect as well. And finally, I think we all know, and we all have had that moment where our customer journey has got interrupted with pop-ups, which are not relevant or are not timely as well as a part of our purchase experience, which makes the entire purchase experience broken. So to address some of these friction points in the journey, I do want to kind of share some of the tools that we could perhaps look at to address each one of them. So starting with the first one, which is all about choice. And I think here's where we can truly leverage the power of conversational AI and really use tools like Help Me Choose, like we have, where you could use AI to ask customers simple and easy to answer questions. It's essentially what the conversational AI tool here is doing exactly what a great retail pro would do in a retail environment by asking you simple questions and helping you narrow down the choice and helping you decide which device is best suited to your needs. And to just bring this to life, a personal experience which I had was that I had to kind of buy a bicycle, and I was looking for a bicycle. And I'm not an avid cycler. So I, went on to the Trek site, and I urge all of you to go and have that experience. So you just go to trekcycles.com. And once you go there, you will see that there is a Help Me Choose experience there, which helps you narrow down very quickly to get to the bike of your choice. And I came down very quickly through a series of questions to the hybrid bike, which I bought, and I expect to collect it tomorrow. So I'm excited about that. So clearly, using tools like Help Me Choose can help us really transform that experience and also offer it with consistency and at scale across partners. And that's really something which is very exciting about these tools. The other interesting thing is that with machine learning, you can actually improve the question flow over a period of time. And that, again, enables us to get a lot of insights about customers as well. So moving on to the next friction point in the journey is the challenge that we all have, that we cannot try products before we buy. And so how do you really bring that near physical experience for customers in a virtual environment when you're shopping at home? And augmented reality is really one of the solutions which I think is making great strides. And I think the fundamental shifts that are happening from a mobile technology standpoint is a real enabler to the AR journey, which many of us are taking as retailers. And what's really cool about this is, unlike earlier where we had to kind of download an app to get an AR experience, today with the advent of web AR, you can almost have that seamless experience straight on from your website without having to download multiple apps. So this becomes really interesting, and especially for technology products where you look at that Elite controller and a single click is going to make a big difference whether I'm going to win that Fortnite game or not. You really need to make sure that you're really telling the story of some of the intricate details of some of these products. And to do that rich storytelling, I think AR does a really great job there. And so AR is, again, something which is really interesting for all of us as marketers to look at from an e-commerce perspective. Now, finally getting to the third friction point in the journey, and this is all about, the recommendations. And again, I'm sure all of us, would have had that moment where we are, wanting to have a burger, and you get to the point of checkout, and the question that comes to you is, do you want fries? And most often the answer is yes. And you are in a mode where you're guilty and you're saying you're not going to have it, but then you come to the checkout and you say yes. And quite honestly, it's that insight which is so critical. There are moments in the customer journey where you want to leave the customer completely uninterrupted and let them have a complete experience in order to discover the core product. And I think one of the mistakes that we all do as marketeers is to interrupt the customer and break the journey during the course of the purchase of the core product. And the real value comes in if you can really bring a solution as a part of the final cart review stage and the experience, because that's where you can actually make it interesting. Like in this example, which you saw, we are looking at Xbox One console. To really have that great gaming experience on the console, you need that Forza 1 game. And the point in the journey where you want to kind of introduce that game is at the last stage once you have purchased the console. So it's really critical that you kind of be very cognizant of the moments in the customer journey where you want to kind of introduce complementary products and really package it in the form of a solution. And therefore, with these attached pop-up solutions that we have, we can actually implement this concept at scale with many of our partners. From the perspective of the experience that I have here at Microsoft. But what can you do? And I think some of the principles here I just wanted to deconstruct so that it becomes relevant to each one of you from your standpoint and your business standpoint. So fundamentally, I think it's really important for us, all of us, to think from that customer journey standpoint. It's all about the attract, browse, consider, decide, and execute, the 5 steps of the customer journey. And we need to really examine, are there any friction points in the customer journey that your customer has? And the best way to do it is to become a customer or get someone to really mimic that entire customer experience and map those moments in the journey to understand where could there be the potential friction points. Having understood those friction points, I think then is when we have to really look at digital tools. And one of the common mistakes that we all do is we take a digital tools first approach. And that's really not perhaps the best thing to do. You really need to take a human first approach to really leveraging some of these tools just from a digital transformation perspective. It is so critical that we kind of use the tools in order to solve the problems and make sure that we kind of take this human first approach to eliminate those friction points. And finally, I think you got to make sure the 2 important words here for me is empower and ease. And you really need to make sure that you're giving that control in the hands of the customer to really answer those questions, to really make those good choices, or to really get immersive with the AR experience so that they can play around and really have that moment where they are in control of that experience and they can really feel that difference. So with that, I'd like to kind of close this session with this a beautiful quote which I read as a part of a book from one of my favorite authors, Arundhati Roy. And the pandemic is a portal is a wonderful metaphor in many ways. It is a metaphor from an architectural standpoint. It is a metaphor from a technology standpoint. And what Arundhati is really telling here to all of us is basically she's kind of trying to inspire us to really look at the world anew and try and see how we could really reimagine what we could accomplish as we come out of this pandemic. And she goes on to kind of talk about the choices that we have. We can carry all the baggage that we have from the past, or we can actually travel very lightly and make sure that we can really getting free-spirited and thinking in a very innovative way of how this future could be reimagined. So it's my invitation to all of you to really imagine the future. I do want to kind of thank all of you for the time this morning. I really appreciate you taking the time and being here, and love to engage with you guys on the chat later as well. So thank you again, and signing off from Seattle here. Bye.